If you decide to invest in Bitcoin, I recommend that you do a couple things before you start. So I'm going to list out these to you, and I'll share after that what I did that worked and what I continue to do. And I'll conclude the section with a Bitcoin investing framework that I now use and keep trying to perfect. So the first thing, kind of a tip, is to live below your means. If you do this, you will have money to invest. If you don't, you won't. It's that simple. Anyone can do this regardless of how much money you make. After getting my bachelor's degree in English and my first master's degree, my first salary job was making $26,000 a year as a glorified librarian for a for-profit university. I was newly married. My wife was still in her doctorate program, and we did this. That was the only money we were bringing in, $26K, and we lived below our means. So, I mean, that's $13 an hour, $26,000 a year. So it's probably the single greatest money management tip that I've ever learned, that I've read about and applied. Live below your means. Everybody can do it regardless of what you make. Number two, never invest more than you're prepared to lose. So you're going to need to determine your risk tolerance. I've said this multiple times, but all investments carry risk, and they range from high to low. So you need to determine for you what your risk tolerance is and how much risk you're willing to take on. Typically, the younger you are, they say, the riskier you can get away with investing because you have more years to live, theoretically. Whereas the older you get, the more conservative and more safe you should be in your decisions with investing. Reasoning being younger people live longer typically than older people because they have less life to live based on statistics. A younger person can weather the ups and downs of the stock market and other markets, whereas maybe someone else who's older and doesn't have as much time to weather those storms can't. The third thing is diversify. Typically, you want to balance out risk by diversifying. And this just means to spread out your investments across different levels of risk, ideally balancing out the higher risk with lower risk, safer investments. I was never 100% into crypto. I always had my wife's 401ks with a pretty nice amount in them because we had decent jobs, especially as we got older, longer in our careers. Number four, decide what type of investing you're going to do and how long you're going to hold your investment. Okay, there's three types of trading you can do, or investing, if you want to call it that specifically. Day trading is doing it through a day or less. Day trading is a day or less. Swing trading is for several weeks, and long term is anything over a year. I've done all three types of these trading in the crypto space, and if you're just starting out, I'd recommend long term. It's the most popular, and there's an entire meme, a Bitcoin meme built around it called HODL. I've talked about HODL before. It came from a drunk Bitcoin holder's rant one night about his frustrations with the price fluctuations and how he was just going to buy and hold regardless what people said. But instead of saying hold, he misspelled it and said HODL, and HODL stuck, or HODL. Long-term is probably the easiest as well. It's what Warren Buffett focuses on, so there's that too. It seemed to work pretty well for him with his value investing. And I will say this, though, I don't think holding cryptocurrencies for anything less than 3 years is wise. My wife and I decided on 5 years, and we stuck with it, and it worked out really well for us. Number five, understand the asset, understand the investment. You really should understand what you're investing in as much as possible before you invest in it. Something even better is to only invest in things you use. For example, if you're into stocks like Amazon, or if you shop at Costco, investing in Costco, or Apple for Apple, etc., for phones and watches. Okay, so those were the couple kind of preliminary steps and tips I wanted to share. But understand that investing is emotional, and it will incite very strong emotions. When Bitcoin goes up, it'll make you happy. When you're happy, you'll want to buy more because you think it'll make you happier. You want to keep that good feeling. But it's not necessarily true. When Bitcoin crashes and goes down, you'll feel sad or angry. And you may be laughing at this point, but I have to say it's very important. When it crashes, you'll be really upset. And you might just want to sell because you're feeling that that's probably not what you should do, because you for sure are selling at a loss. You'd lose money. And you can say, well, I already lost money, but that's not true. That's only considered a paper gain or a paper loss. We've talked about that. When the price of Bitcoin goes down, it's a good idea to buy more. When it's going up, it's beneficial to take some profit. That's some of the general advice that I've used. I remember Ronnie Moas used to say, if you really believe in something that you're investing in and it goes on sale, buy some more. Okay, so if you remember from my Bitcoin story, you'll remember that I spent a year and a half learning about Bitcoin from 11 to 13 before I ever invested in it. Additionally, I waited for a good moment. Technically, I probably shouldn't have bought in a bull run because it was going from like $3 to $30. So, maybe, but I did. I was afraid of missing out. I felt I was, gonna, not be there when it went higher, and it was true. But Bitcoin still had a lot of room to grow, and that was just my time. I did jump in at that time. I also predetermined how much money I was going to use to invest, and my wife and I agreed on this amount in what we were investing in. Once I invested all $5,000 of that initial some money that we decided on, which we call, or they call, a lump sum investment, I didn't buy any more for till the next year. By the next year in 14, I started to buy more. Bitcoin crashed and ended up around $300. And I still felt it would almost be irresponsible if I didn't buy more because I believed in it. We didn't have the $5,000 laying around anymore, but we both had good jobs and little savings. So I talked my wife into, instead of lump sum investing, do some dollar cost averaging and buy some every month. I think it was Coinbase I did at that time, which is probably the easiest to do and probably the wisest. If you buy in at the same time every month, regardless if the price is high or low. And ultimately, by the end of the year, we invested another $5,000 into Bitcoin. After 2015, I still wanted to buy more with the dollar cost averaging strategy, but my wife really wasn't comfortable investing more in Bitcoin, considering Bitcoin was in the doldrums. It was really kind of low. It was a miserable period at that point. And I wasn't going to push it, since I already was happy to, get her buy-in, and we had a bunch of Bitcoin, I think over 40, 45 at that time. But over the next year and a half, once it started its next bull run from like mid 2017 to early 19, I started to do the dollar cost averaging again and lump sum purchasing when I was able to. Bitcoin was going through another rally. It's the last one before this current one, if you want to call this current one, up to 64,000 a rally, which kind of is. But I felt that buying Bitcoin would never be a bad decision. My wife, she had difficulty countering that argument, since we had already made over $1 million on paper at that point. And I still feel that way. I still feel that way about Bitcoin now. I don't think it'll ever be a bad investment, at least in the near future. During this time, I also spent the 2 Bitcoins worth of gains I made flipping Bitcoin Cash, which I got for free during the first major coin split, to get into altcoins. It was a great idea, but it was really, really awful timing, because altcoins were at the top. This was January 18, and I lost a lot of money that way. In fact, that was the primary reason why in the tax year 2020, we had about a $70,000 capital gains loss with cryptocurrencies, because of the purchases I made in early 18 at the top. So I'll talk about that more in another section near the end, about my failures, and so you'll get to hear more about that. Yippee. You could argue, because I've used the same logic for the same argument, that I didn't ever have to lose that much money on altcoins if I would have just held on longer, even to this point in 2021. Because what happened after 18 is I became really more sold on how Bitcoin was really it. Some people call this becoming a Bitcoin maximalist or maximalism. I'm still mostly like this. In fact, I got like a little a wooden potato doll that says Bitcoin maximalist on it. My wife made it for me. I should bring it in and show you. But this kind of person, or this belief, is that you really see Bitcoin as the most viable cryptocurrency in existence, and even for the future. okay? Some people take it to the extreme and think everything else is crap, or a shit coin, as people will call it. Excuse my French. I'm not fully there yet. I've kind of gone back and forth on this. I think there are some coins, other altcoins, that have value, but I do think the majority of them don't have a lot of value. I don't want to just say worthless, but a lot of them are. A lot of them are scams. But back to 2020 and 2021, really last year, 2020, I had to sell those altcoins because we had to pay taxes and we had other financial commitments. So I didn't even have a chance to hold on to it. So it wasn't just because of the Bitcoin maximalism, it also, life happened. Okay, based upon the basic investing advice I just gave, those tips, I came up with what I call a Bitcoin investing goal sheet. It's a summary of the decision points I came to and what I continue to think and do moving forward. Maybe it's not the perfect kind of thinking for you. Adapt it to your situation, your style, your family, whatever your situation. But I'll share it with you, and hopefully some of you will benefit from it in some way. Okay, Bitcoin investing goal sheet. If you can't answer yes, again, this is what I am telling myself. If you can't answer yes to all these questions, then you should not be investing in Bitcoin. Are you prepared to lose your entire investment? If you can't afford to lose all you've invested in Bitcoin, there's a high likelihood this decision to invest in Bitcoin will devastate you emotionally and financially. It's what I've learned, and that's what I still believe. Next one, if you're in a committed relationship, does your spouse or significant other or partner fully agree with your decision to invest in Bitcoin or not? Have you decided how much money you will invest? Anytime, answer those. You can write those out. Have you decided what method you will use and with what kind of frequency? So are you going to do a recurring, dollar cost averaging, lump sum, or both? Do you understand Bitcoin? You've heard me say this a lot, but I'm of the belief that people need to have at least a basic understanding of Bitcoin, enough to have a conviction to stick with their goals before seriously investing in it. Because when the going gets tough, because it will for everybody, and anyone who's ever invested in Bitcoin would say the same, I stuck to the principles of what I understood about Bitcoin. And if I didn't have that solid understanding, then I would have sold when it crashed. I would have bought when it spiked, and both would have been dumb decisions for me. But because I had more education and understanding, I was able to better weather the storm. Have you predetermined how long you're going to hold Bitcoin? So set a predetermined time to hold Bitcoin. I recommend 3 to 5 years minimum, but 5 to 10 years is probably better. Have you decided when you will sell? Determine your exit strategy. So when you'll get out, at what price. I made these sell scenarios that I might include later at another point, where if Bitcoin hits this price, I'll sell for this much, I'll pay this much in taxes, I'll tithe this much, I'll dollar cost back in at this amount, and I had a kind of a whole stream of if this, then this. So that was it. That was my Bitcoin goal sheet and my tips, and a little bit more in detail about my story investing in Bitcoin. That was just from my experience and what I'm using moving forward, and it's worked really well for me. I don't think you have to make any of this complicated. I think you need to use as much reason and logic and as little emotion as possible. All the investors that I've studied and the books that I've read and people that I follow say the same thing. You have to be very analytical about it. I tend to have a lot of emotion, but for investing, it's a rational decision, okay? If you believe in it, you get more. If not, maybe you get out. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with not investing at all. Investing is not for everyone. I think it's kind of fun, okay? But some people don't think it's fun, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But you know that. You know yourself, and you know if this is for you or if not. So I hope that helped. Okay, the next one that we're going to be going over is not your keys, not your coins. Okay, I talked about this a little earlier on, but this is where we talk about if you don't have the possession, you don't have possession of your Bitcoin or cryptocurrency private key, and you do not actually own or have your Bitcoin, your cryptocurrency. That's what's next.